Very few opening lines in English poetry have achieved the kind of immortality that "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day" enjoys. At first glance, it seems like a simple, almost playful question, but as you go deeper in Sonnet 18, you begin to see that it carries Shakespeare's most confident reflections on beauty, time, and the enduring power of words. At first glance, it might appear to be just a comparison between a beloved and nature, but the sonnet quickly moves beyond that. Shakespeare does not merely place his beloved alongside summer, he shows how the beloved surpasses it. After all, in England, summer is charming but fleeting. Sometimes it is too hot, sometimes it is short, and it is easily clouded. What Shakespeare promises is something greater than a summer's day, a beauty which is preserved not in the fragile passing of seasons but in the everlasting strength of poetry. And that is why this sonnet still lives on wherever people read, remember, and celebrate its beauty. Before we jump in, hello and welcome to School of Literature. My name is Roshan, and in today's video, we are going to dive into one of Shakespeare's most famous and loved poems, Sonnet 18. We will go through it step by step, unpack what it really means, and see why this sonnet has lived on for centuries. Before we look closely at Sonnet 18, it is important to know what makes a Shakespearean sonnet unique. Each sonnet has 14 lines written in that heartbeat rhythm that is called iambic pentameter. The pattern usually unfolds in three quatrains that are three sets of 4 lines. It is followed by a final couplet that often delivers a striking conclusion. The rhyme scheme of Shakespearean sonnet is very easy to remember. It is A B A B C D C D E F E F G G. And somewhere along the way, usually at line 9, there is a volta or turn where the poem shifts its moods or its direction. Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets in total, and most of them explore some timeless themes such as love, beauty, time, and mortality. Out of these 154, the first 126 sonnets are often called the Fair Youth sequence, where the poet addresses a young man whose beauty and charm inspire deep admiration, sometimes even tinged with desire. Now, Sonnet 18 comes at an important moment. It follows what are known as the procreation sonnets. These sonnets urge the young man to marry and continue his beauty through children. But in this sonnet, Shakespeare shifts the idea. Instead of tying immortality to bloodlines, he proposes another kind of permanence, the immortality that comes through verse. It is a turning point where poetry itself becomes the answer of time's decay. That is why Sonnet 18 feels so fresh and assured. There is no hesitation, no apology for inadequate words. There is just complete confidence that beauty can be preserved forever in poetry. And you can feel that confidence right from the very first quatrain. The opening lines do not waste time with elaborate setup. The sonnet plunges straight into the central question. Let us now look closely at how Shakespeare builds his case, step by step, beginning with those unforgettable first 4 lines. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds to shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. This sonnet begins with a question. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? At first, it sounds like a gentle compliment, which is almost teasing in its simplicity. But the question is not as straightforward as it looks. A summer's day was proverbially seen as perfect in Shakespeare's time. It was warm, bright, and full of life. Yet the speaker hesitates here. The rhetorical question is not just for the beloved, it also draws us, the readers, into the uncertainty. The answer comes immediately in line 2. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. The beloved is declared superior, not only more beautiful but also more balanced. Where summer can be wild or unpredictable, the beloved's beauty is calm, steady, and enduring. The word temperate here is key. It suggests moderation, a kind of perfection that avoids extremes. By the third line, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, Shakespeare makes the contrast sharper. The beauty of nature, even at its freshest, is fragile. May, which in Shakespeare's calendar was considered part of summer, is vulnerable to sudden storms. The roughness of the winds, emphasized by the heavy rhythm at the start of the line, disrupts this delicate image of blossoming birds. And in line 4, and summer's lease hath all too short a date, the imagery turns almost legal. Summer, which is the most admired season, does not own its beauty forever. It merely borrows it on a short lease. The season has a fixed expiration date, a reminder that all natural beauty is temporary. So, in just 4 lines, Shakespeare sets up his argument. Summer may be beautiful, but it is unpredictable. It is brief and fading. By contrast, the beloved's beauty is already being lifted above the natural world. It hints at the permanence that the poet will soon promise through verse. In the first quatrain, Shakespeare sets up the comparison only to show its limits. Summer is lovely, yes, but also brief and uncertain. Having established this, the second quatrain sharpens the contrast even further. Here he lists the flaws of summer one by one, as if building his case in court, and each flaw makes the beloved's superiority shine brighter. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. The imagery here is both familiar and striking. The eye of heaven is, of course, the sun. Sometimes it burns too hot and makes summer unbearable. At other times, its gold complexion is covered with clouds and the summer is dimmed and dull. The beauty of summer is unstable, it is at the mercy of extremes. Then comes the larger truth in line 7, and every fair from fair sometime declines. In other words, everything beautiful eventually loses its beauty. The repetition of fair here is deliberate. It reminds us that decline is not just about nature, but about all things we call beautiful, including human beauty. Finally, line 8 explains why this decline is inevitable. It happens by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. Beauty fades either through random accidents or simply through the natural course of time, which Shakespeare pictures as a ship which is left untrimmed, its sails unadjusted against the winds of change. The image is powerful. It suggests that no matter what we do, nature moves on and beauty cannot hold itself steady forever. So while the first quatrain showed that summer is too brief, the second quatrain widens the argument. Not just summer, but all beauty is vulnerable. With this, the stage is perfectly set for the volta, the turn where Shakespeare will declare that his beloved is different and that his beauty will not fade. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. Up to this point, Shakespeare has carefully built his argument. Summer is too short, too unreliable, and all beauty in nature eventually fades. But with the third quatrain, the poem takes its decisive turn, which is what we call the volta. Here, the poet moves from describing the limits of nature to asserting the eternal quality of the beloved's beauty. Notice the very first word, but. That single word signals the shift. Everything that has come before, which includes the rough winds, the fading flowers, and the dimmed sun, is now overturned. Where nature declines, the beloved's beauty will endure. Shakespeare introduces the phrase eternal summer, which is a metaphor that suggests not only youth and beauty, but also warmth, vitality, and joy that will never pass away. In line 10, he strengthens the claim the beloved will not lose possession of the beauty they oust. The word oust is interesting here because it carries a double meaning in Shakespeare's time. It can mean own, which would suggest true possession, but it can also mean owe, which could hint that beauty is something borrowed from nature. By promising permanence, Shakespeare cleverly reverses this debt. Instead of owing beauty back to time, the beloved will keep it forever. The boldness grows in line 11. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. Normally, death is imagined as triumphant and boasting of its power to claim all life and beauty. But here death is denied its victory. The beloved will not walk in its shadows because something stronger than death is at work. And finally, line 12 explains how this miracle is achieved. When in eternal lines to time thou growest. The eternal lines are the lines of the sonnet itself. Poetry becomes the vessel in which beauty is preserved, allowing the beloved not just to resist time but to grow with it, to become part of its flow. Instead of fading, the beloved's beauty will live on as long as the poem is read. This quatrain is where Shakespeare's voice feels most confident. He is not simply describing beauty anymore. He is now claiming the power to outwit both time and death through art. It is an astonishing shift that prepares us for the couplet that closes the poem. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. After building his case step by step, Shakespeare arrives at the couplet. The couplet is a place where a sonnet traditionally lands its final blow. These two lines are as bold as they are beautiful. The repetition of so long gives the couplet its rhythm and certainty, almost like a vow. Shakespeare sets no limits. He says, as long as human beings live and as long as eyes are able to read, the sonnet itself will endure. And because it endures, the beloved will live with it. The word this is deceptively simple but incredibly powerful. This refers to the poem you are reading at that very moment. It is a gesture of supreme confidence. Shakespeare points to his own creation and says, in effect, here lies immortality. Unlike nature, which fades, or beauty, which time diminishes, this poem has the power to preserve. There is also a subtle shift here. Earlier in the sonnet, death was personified as something that might brag of its victories. But in the couplet, death is simply absent. It does not even need to be mentioned again because poetry has already claimed its triumph. So the couplet does not just conclude the poem, it fulfills its promise. From the opening question about a summer's day to the critique of nature's fragility to the declaration of eternal summer, everything has been leading to this final confident assertion. Art outlasts life, and through art, beauty becomes eternal. That is why Sonnet 18 continues to resonate centuries later. Every time it is read aloud, every time it is remembered or quoted, it breathes new life into the beauty it celebrates. Shakespeare's promise, in that sense, is still being kept. Looking at the sonnet as a whole, its force lies in the way it balances fragility and permanence. On one hand, Shakespeare shows us how quickly seasons shift, how easily beauty is touched by change or accident. On the other, he claims that poetry can resist that cycle and hold on to what would otherwise be lost. What emerges is not simply praise of the beloved, but a larger statement that verse has the strength to outlast nature and that love, when shaped into art, becomes enduring. This confidence that words can carry beauty beyond time is what gives Sonnet 18 its lasting power. And so we return to that opening question, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Shakespeare asked it centuries ago, but the answer he gave still echoes today. Summer fades, beauty changes, time moves on, but the lines of this sonnet remain and carries with it the promise of something lasting. Every time we read it, we breathe life once more into the beauty it preserves. That is the magic of Sonnet 18. It is not just about a fleeting season or a beloved. It is about the power of words to keep love, beauty, and memory alive for as long as we keep reading. Thank you for joining me in this journey through one of Shakespeare's most celebrated works. I'll see you super soon in the next video. Till then, keep reading and keep learning.